Tonight, America resumes military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine.
Secretary Rubio, Sky News. Do you think you'll get a ceasefire?
We were in the room in Saudi Arabia as talks began and on the scene after Kyiv launched hundreds of drones into Russia. Now it's over to the Kremlin.
We'll take this offer now to the Russians, and we hope that they'll say yes to peace. The ball's now in their court.
And after this unforgettable blow-up in the Oval Office, another White House invitation for Ukraine's president. But will it lead to peace? Also coming up, Donald Trump intensifies his trade war despite market turmoil. He's threatening to double tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminium, dismissing warnings of a recession risk.
I don't see it at all. I think this country is going to boom. But as I said, I can do it the easy way or the hard way. The hard way to do it is exactly what I'm doing, but the results are going to be 20 times greater.
We'll be live in Greenland tonight as a vote in the Arctic territory is overshadowed by threats of invasion. And as the former Philippines president is charged with crimes against humanity, we'll look back at Duterte's brutal crackdown during his war on drugs. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. We begin the programme tonight in Saudi Arabia. For a second time, the kingdom hosted talks as the United States pushes for an end to the war in Ukraine. They met the Russian delegation a few weeks ago. This time, it was Ukraine's turn. And after 9 hours of negotiations, a positive outcome. A US proposal for a 30-day ceasefire on all fronts of the war. For America's part, an immediate resumption of intelligence sharing and security assistance to Ukraine. That means the ball is now firmly in Russia's court. But what will they demand in return? The agreement was thrashed out during a meeting brokered by the Saudi Crown Prince. Sky's international correspondent Alex Rossi was at the talks in Jeddah and sent this report.
There is much at stake, and as the American and Ukrainian delegations walked into the conference room side by side, the mood was clearly focused. Around this table, they were hoping to make history by formulating a plan to end the war Russia started in Ukraine. Secretary Rubio, Sky News. Do you think you'll get a ceasefire? No answer to that question before we were ushered out and the negotiations began. And after hours of talks, the US team finally emerged after sundown to announce an agreement on a proposed immediate 30-day ceasefire.
Today we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable.
The Ukrainian delegation today made something very clear, that they share President Trump's vision for peace. They share his determination to end the fighting, to end the killing.
The Ukrainian team described the talks as constructive, with President Zelenskyy later saying on social media, the American side understands our arguments. But as the delegates left the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, where they'd been hosted by the Saudi government, they knew there were still plenty of issues that needed to be resolved, and they also need Russia to agree. Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, is expected to fly to Moscow later this week. It's reported he'll meet Russia's president, Vladimir Putin. Here in Jeddah, the Ukrainians wanted to mend relations after that now infamous diplomatic spat in the Oval Office and see the restoration of military aid and intelligence sharing. For the Americans, they wanted to see that the Ukrainians were prepared and willing to make tough decisions to bring about peace. And on both those counts, the talks appear to have been a diplomatic success. It was lost on no one, though, that the talks took place as Russia and Ukraine continued to trade blows using the language of violence. Ukraine launching a massive drone attack in the early hours on the Moscow region. And despite more than 3 years of fighting, The Kremlin has signalled its war objectives remain the same, no concessions. But officials say they are waiting to hear from the US the details of the discussions. The Russians, too, have been launching new attacks. This was the port city of Odessa, once again in flames. The Trump administration may want to put out the fires of this war quickly, but reaching an agreement will take time. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Jeddah.
OK, we'll be going live to Mark Stone at the White House and Ivor Bennett in Moscow in just a moment. But first, let's go straight to Alex, who, of course, you saw there in his report, was in the room in Jeddah. And Alex, I mean, just in the last couple of hours, we've been hearing from both sides, and they've both described the meeting today as productive. We also saw a tweet from President Zelenskyy. Just give us a sense of the mood there. And, of course, we saw some of that in your report.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. All sides are describing what happened today as constructive. But when they walked in, you saw those images of them going into this conference centre to start the negotiations. They look pretty stern. And I think it's fair to say neither side really knew what to expect. And I think the indication of that is we were given very little information until pretty late in the day that there would even be a joint statement, that they were going to Marco Rubio and his team were going to stand in front of the cameras and say something, because I don't think that they were certain that they'd actually be able to reach any kind of conclusion at all. But after, many hours, 9 or so hours, well into darkness, they started at around lunchtime. They did come up with something that looks pretty promising. It is going to take a long time, but if you think about it this way, only a few months ago, nobody was really talking about any kind of talks at all. Now they have taken the first steps. Now, these are baby steps, and it's the old adage, Yalda, you can't make peace if you don't have a partner. Well, certainly the Americans think they do have a partner in the Ukrainians after all of this. They've managed to see the Ukrainians as being fairly willing. They've been convinced of that, persuaded by the delegation. But, of course, the Russians need to buy in. They need to sign up to this as well. And without that, if the US team can't get that and them on board, there won't be peace at all, and the fighting will continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we've seen your reporting from the front lines of Ukraine. Let's go straight to Ivor, who joins us from Moscow. And just picking up, Ivor, on what Alex was saying there, you need a partner to reach peace. And the Americans think they have a partner now in the Ukrainians. And we keep hearing this phrase, the ball is in Russia's court. Donald Trump saying in the last hour or so, it takes two to tango. How is all this going down in Moscow at the moment? Because, of course, we also saw a drone attack in the capital today.
Yeah, hi, Yalda. So the big question is Moscow going to agree to a 30-day ceasefire? And it's very hard to predict because, on the one hand, Russia has been consistently saying that it doesn't want a ceasefire, it doesn't want a temporary truce. Instead, it's called for a long-term peace deal that respects and tackles what it calls the root causes of this conflict. And by root causes, Russia means NATO's historical eastward expansion, which it sees as an act of aggression by the West. And by saying that, it's trying to ensure its own security concerns are met in the event of any long-term peace deal being signed. But there's another reason, Yalda, why Russia wouldn't want to agree to a temporary cessation of hostilities. And that's because Russia right now, of course, has the upper hand on the battlefield. Ukrainian forces are the ones on the back foot, and any break in the fighting would give Ukrainian forces some much-needed breathing space, time to regroup. So why on earth would Moscow want to agree to that? It wants Ukraine begging for mercy by the time they come to signing any peace deal in order to secure the most favourable terms. But on the other hand, Vladimir Putin in the past few weeks has been relentless in trying to cast himself as the peacemaker and Zelenskyy as the warmonger in order to secure and win Donald Trump's favour. And up until this point, it appears to have worked, with Donald Trump seemingly siding with Russia quite comprehensively in all these pre-negotiations over the last few weeks. But now all of a sudden the US president is trying to call Vladimir Putin's bluff, it feels like, and saying, look, why don't you put your money where your mouth is if you do really want peace? It's going to be very interesting to see. And I think it might come down to what else is tied into this deal, what else the US makes contingent on this. Will they say, for example, that you're only going to get this reset of relations we're talking about if you agree to this ceasefire? Steve Witkoff is the one who's going to be presenting these proposals to Vladimir Putin here in Moscow, and we understand that could be tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Ivor, thank you so much. Let's go to Mark, who, as I said, is in Washington for us. And Mark, you and I spoke about this blow-up that took place a couple of weeks ago in the Oval Office. Now we're seeing another invitation extended to Volodymyr Zelenskyy to come back, I guess, to sign the minerals deal, and they're happy with the progress that was made today as well.
Yes, I think in a sense what Donald Trump has achieved since that blow-up is to cast himself as fully in control of this deal. And it is a deal that he is striving to get. He's done that by getting Zelenskyy, getting Ukraine to dance fully to his tune. I guess what we've seen and what is the unorthodox nature of the way Trump does business and does diplomacy is everything has been done in public. It could well be the case that under normal conditions, all of what we have seen, we wouldn't have seen, but it might have happened anyway. The blow-ups, the arguments, the disagreements, the Zelenskyy trying to persuade Donald Trump of his position, that would all normally have been done in private. But the way Donald Trump likes to do things, because it presents him as the sort of kingmaker, as the all-powerful leader, is to sort of encourage these moments to happen in public. And I think that's what we saw 2 weeks ago. I mean, it was no coincidence that the cameras were there, that J.D. Vance saw a moment to get involved as well. So that was the beginning of a very public negotiation that might otherwise have been conducted in private. But the fact is, as Alex said, they are now talking, at least with one side, about the prospect of a ceasefire, and you can't take that away from them. That is an achievement for sure. But, I was struck by some of the language in the statement, and then comparing the American or the joint statement with what Zelenskyy and his team released alongside it. Zelenskyy was at pains to point out that the Americans now see their position. So the Americans are saying the Ukrainians see our position. The Ukrainians are saying, well, yeah, and they can see ours as well. And I think the crux of all this is how Russia reacts. And what Zelenskyy did in the Oval Office very publicly, maybe not the best move on his part, was just to tell Donald Trump, remember, you can't trust Putin. Yes, we can have a ceasefire, but who knows whether he'll abide by it. He hasn't before. But listen to Trump speaking in the last hour or two at the White House about the prospect of Zelenskyy being back.
I think it's a big difference between the last visit you saw at the Oval Office and this. So that's a total ceasefire. Ukraine has agreed to it, and hopefully Russia will agree to it. We're going to meet with them later on today and tomorrow.
Is Zelenskyy invited back to the White House?
Sure.
The Russians
I'll
to
talk
agree?
to Vladimir Putin, yeah.
When will
I
you
want to
talk
get,
to him?
look, that's the other, it takes two to tango, as they say, right? So hopefully he'll also agree, and I really think that would be 75% of the way. The rest is getting it documented and, negotiating land positions. I know we have a big meeting with Russia tomorrow, and some great conversations hopefully will ensue.
So things moving pretty fast now. The NATO Secretary General is here in Washington on Thursday. Trump says he will talk to Putin this week on the phone. Maybe we'll get Zelenskyy back here in Washington by the end of the week. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? As you say, things move incredibly quickly. Thank you so much, Mark, Ivor, and Alex. And Mark will be coming to you a little later in the programme as well. Now, Alexander Mereshko is chair of the Ukraine Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. First of all, sir, just your reaction to the developments that we've been seeing. Quite positive notes coming out from both sides, both the delegations today.
Well, overall, it's positive, it's encouraging that we have concrete results. To me, the biggest win for Ukraine at the moment is the resumption of supply of military equipment and weaponry and the exchange of intelligence information. For us, it's crucial for our defense capabilities and survival. As for the ceasefire, we should remember history. We should remember that we had dozens of such ceasefires before under the Minsk Accords, and each time these ceasefires had been violated in the most flagrant way by Putin. But now we have one psychological and interesting difference, because in this time, if Putin assumed that he agrees to such ceasefire, the guarantor of such ceasefire will be Trump himself. And I would like to see whether Putin respects or doesn't respect Mr. Trump.
Yeah, I mean, that is the big question here. As you say, we have seen Minsk 1 and 2 violated in the past. In fact, that became the crux of the argument that President Zelenskyy was having in the Oval Office with President Trump, where he was saying, look, we've been here before. We need security guarantees. So while things seem very positive at the moment, at the same time, we know when we say the ball is in Russia's court, perhaps the ball has always been in Russia's court.
Well, exactly. Absolutely agree. And Ukraine has demonstrated its willingness, its will to peace, and we have done it many times. Well, to stop the war, it's very easy. Putin has just to withdraw his troops from the territory of Ukraine, and it would be enough. But under present circumstances, if Putin agrees to ceasefire, I'm very skeptical that he will stick to this ceasefire. That's why we continue to need reliable security guarantees. And the best and the cheapest security guarantee for us is NATO membership. For a very simple reason, because it's the only thing which can deter Putin.
That, sir, has been taken off the table for now. I mean, we saw those preemptive concessions that were discussed a few weeks ago with Pete Hegseth saying, look, right now is not the time to talk about NATO membership. But the Russians are also indicating that why should they agree to any kind of deal when they believe they have the upper hand on the battlefield right now?
Well, they don't have upper hand on the battlefield because the situation has stabilized. Ukraine is still in control of the chunk of Russian territory in the Kursk Oblast. Ukraine is in control of the Black Sea also. Situation militarily is not that bad. But again, you know, the thing is that NATO membership is the only thing which can help our survival. If, for example, Mr. Trump or our allies have better solutions, more reliable guarantees, I think we can discuss that. But at present time, I think this security guarantee, NATO membership, should be on the table.
Do you think, you know, given we've seen the uncertainty of the last few weeks, that Ukraine can stand, you know, and hold the line without American support? Because it's difficult to know. Today, the Americans have been positive. Last week, they weren't. Next week, we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's true. Churchill famously stated once that the only thing which is worse than fighting with your allies is fighting without them. So, but, you know, I'm glad that due to this meeting, these talks, we finally have our relations with the new administration back on track. It's already important and very encouraging development.
Yeah, Churchill also said that America will do everything before it tries everything before it does the right thing. Mr. Merezhko, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Now to the rest of the day's news. And when Donald Trump was campaigning to return to the White House, he promised Americans an economic boom like no other. Ever the showman, his promises were exaggerated and absolute.
We will begin a new era of soaring income, skyrocketing wealth, millions and millions of new jobs, and a booming middle class. We're going to boom like we've never boomed before.
But now the performance of the campaign trail is clashing with the reality of governing. His tariffs policy has created uncertainty, and that is spooking the markets. Last week, he dismissed it as just a little disturbance. But now, could the man who promised to make America affordable again be a little bit spooked as well? We'll have a listen to what he said this weekend when asked about the possibility of a recession.
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. we're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. And there are always periods of, it takes a little time.
That's a definite shift in tone. Any other president would then try to project stability, but not Donald Trump. Instead, he threatened to double tariffs on steel and aluminium from Canada. This is him less than 2 hours ago outside the White House, apparently unconcerned about the impact on the markets. Have a listen.
Do you think there will be a recession?
I don't see it at all. I think this country is going to boom. But as I said, I can do it the easy way or the hard way. The hard way to do it is exactly what I'm doing, but the results are going to be 20 times greater.
When you look at the market selling off, that didn't concern you, and
Nope,
where do you see it
doesn't
going?
concern me. I think some people are going to make great deals by buying stocks and bonds and all the things they're buying. I think we're going to have an economy that's a real economy, not a fake economy.
So how did we get here? On the 1st of February, Donald Trump ordered a 25% tariff on goods from Canada. Those took effect at the beginning of this month. Canada swiftly imposed some of their own, the first of them a 25% tax on $155 billion worth of US goods. That kicked off a tit-for-tat battle. Yesterday, Ontario's Premier announced a 25% surcharge on US-bound electricity and said he wouldn't back down until the threat of US tariffs goes away. In response, President Trump then said he would double tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminium due to take effect tomorrow from 25% to 50%. Well, we have two of our US correspondents following developments. Back to Mark at the White House in a moment, but first to Canada. Martha Kellner joins us from Victoria in British Columbia. And Martha, I mean, we've been seeing, quite a firm stance from the Canadians, which is doing quite well in the polls we saw Justin Trudeau doing well, and Mark Carney has also been now holding firm. Things may have cooled down a little bit. Am I right to read it that way in the last sort of hour or so?
Yeah, it does seem that way, Yalda. Just to give you a flavour of the feeling here, the people I've been speaking to say they're waking up every day at the moment, and there seems to be new news of Donald Trump waging war, in their eyes, on Canada. New news of Donald Trump imposed tariffs. This morning, it was this threat of a 50% tariff on Canadian aluminium and steel going over the border into the United States. Well, Donald Trump, as you mentioned there, seems to be slightly cooling the temperature. He says now that 50% tariff, which was expected to come into play tomorrow, now won't happen. Instead, it will be a 25% tariff on Canadian aluminium and steel. But who knows where this will go next. And Donald Trump is by far the biggest issue on the in tray of the new Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney. He's been in the job for just a few days now, but Donald Trump continuing to cause a headache for him. I have to say, Carney seems to be more popular here than the outgoing Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. People see Carney as the right man for the moment. He is, of course, a money man. He used to be the head of the Bank of Canada and, of course, the Bank of England. So people fairly confident in him, and he's been issuing a statement of defiance. On X, he posted today saying, Donald Trump's latest tariffs are an attack on Canadian workers, families and businesses. My government will ensure our response has maximum impact in the US and minimal impact here in Canada. My government will keep our tariffs on until the Americans show us respect and make credible, reliable commitments to free and fair trade. You were mentioning earlier, Yalda, yesterday the Premier of Ontario said he was going to impose 25% tariffs or 25% surcharge on electricity being sold across the border to the US states of New York, Michigan and Minnesota. He says he's now put that on pause pending a meeting that he, the Premier Doug Ford, will have with Donald Trump's key economic advisor, Howard Lutnick, on Thursday. But certainly here in Canada, there is a real sense of betrayal, of upset and of anger of what is going on right now. They think the US is continually picking on them and they're trying to fight back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get the view then from the US, from Mark. And Mark, I understand President Trump has been speaking about this very issue in the last few minutes. We're trying to get that on tape as soon as possible. Just bring us up to date.
Yes, he has confirmed what Martha was alluding to, that in fact the 50% tariffs on aluminium and steel from Canada that he announced just this morning actually will not happen. That is as a result of the meeting that has been secured between the Premier of Ontario and the Treasury Secretary here. That meeting, I think, will happen tomorrow. So they're talking once again. The threat that Canada put on to reciprocate with tariffs on electricity, that has been paused pending this meeting, which has allowed Donald Trump to climb down and go back down to 25%. From 50%. Nevertheless, what is going to happen at midnight is a huge moment indeed, because 25% tariffs on aluminium and steel across the board on nations globally will go into effect. They've had, less than a month countries have had less than a month to try and deal with this huge issue. There will be no exemptions, we're told. And for the UK, this is clearly a body blow. This is something they wanted to avoid. There has been a lot of negotiation going on behind the scenes with British government officials. We know that Jonathan Reynolds, the Trade Secretary in the UK, spoke to Howard Lutnick on Sunday. Trump and Keir Starmer spoke yesterday on the phone. Part of that would have been about Ukraine. Part of it, you could be sure, would have been about trying to get an exemption for the UK. It's not going to happen. About 5% of UK steel exports, 6% of aluminium exports are to the US, so they will now be subject to 25% tariffs. That will have an impact. I spoke a little earlier on to Peter Navarro, who is Donald Trump's trade advisor, senior trade advisor. He confirmed there would be no exemptions and then got pretty irritated when I suggested that the markets were not reacting well. Have a listen.
Very good reason why no exemptions, no exclusions exist as a policy. It's because when we were kind enough as a country to make those kind of gestures to our friends, they bit the hand that fed them, and that's not going to happen again.
But the president seems to be changing his mind by the hour at the moment.
You gotta move out of the way. So
what are your views on the fact that
you don't understand what a negotiation looks like? The president is negotiating strategically. So stop with the rhetoric, okay? Just stop that crap.
Mark, just listening to him there, I mean, regardless of what they're saying, the markets don't care. Inflation doesn't care. The idea of recession doesn't care what Donald Trump says. I'm thinking back to this front cover of The Economist that I saw, less than a year ago, describing America's economy as the envy of the world. 20 days ago, the markets look like they're at an all-time high. It's extraordinary, actually, how quickly things have flipped.
Yeah, but Donald Trump, as recently as today, and he's done it many days before that, has been trying to cast the American economy as having been terrible, absolutely terrible, under the Biden administration, and that he is now turning things around. He's trying to present an economy that was bad that is now improving, even though if you look at the stock markets, they are tumbling. They rallied first thing this morning, but then when he announced 50% tariffs on Canada, they tumbled again. They want certainty. They certainly don't have it. In the rest of that exchange that you didn't play there, Peter Navarro absolutely fundamentally dismissed the idea that this market reaction is anything to worry about.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Well, stay with us because coming up, the ball is in Russia's court on a ceasefire in Ukraine. Well, that's what we've heard. I'll ask French filmmaker and philosopher Bernard-Henri Lévy for his thoughts on the likelihood of peace.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, okay?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free, wherever you get your news. This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hans is a highly trained police dog. The force is incredible. It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
Free wherever you get your news.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, DC.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Let's return to that potential breakthrough after talks between the US and Ukraine. French philosopher and filmmaker Bernard-Henri Lévy has been vocal in his support for Kiev since the annexation of Crimea in 2014. He's repeatedly described the conflict as a battle for the future of Europe. Turns out he was right, and we can speak to Bernard-Henri now. Thank you so much for joining us, as always, on the programme. You have done, as I said, years of work in Ukraine. You were most recently there just in the last couple of weeks. If you could just give me your assessment on how you think things are currently developing.
Yes, I've been there not last week, last days. I'm just back from Pokrovsk on the front line. And what is happening today is, of course, important. But in a way, it is no real news. Ukraine has always been in favor of peace. Ukraine has always been pro-peace. Let's see now if Vladimir Putin changed mind and is also willing for peace. This is the next step. This is the important step.
What do you think the Russians will do? Because on the one hand, the Ukrainians are skeptical. We saw that blow up in the Oval Office where President Zelenskyy was saying, look, we need security guarantees because what we've seen from the Russians in the past, whether it's Minsk 1 or 2, they have defied these ceasefires before.
Absolutely. A ceasefire, again, is not big news. We had the ceasefires after Minsk I, Minsk II. Ukrainians are accustomed to ceasefires which have been violated again and again. So what is needed is much more than that. It is solid guarantees of peace. It is return of the kids. Don't forget that there is 19,000 girls and boys who have been kidnapped, who are in Russian territory, if they are still alive. And this should be a precondition. Bring the children back. That is the first thing. We'll see. We'll see. I do hope with all my heart. Again, I was with the defenders of Ukraine a few days ago. It is heartbreaking. All these women and men fighting so bravely, losing their life, so many crippled people. Peace would be a dream. It is a dream of Ukrainians. Let's hope it happens. The good news today, Yalda, is the real good news is that there is a photo of Andrei Yermak, the main companion of Zelenskyy, and Michael Waltz. The good news is that America and Ukraine are coming together again. This is good news. The good news is that military aid is restored without any condition. This is, for me, the best. And the world is going back to sort of normality after this scandal, this shame which happened in the Oval Office.
Bernard, I wonder what you think about this moment in general when we look at the situation where Europe is being forced to step up, increase its defence spending, and think more broadly and act, I guess, given the United States has said, we're stepping back as far as your defence is concerned and you need to step up. Do you think this is some kind of moment of reckoning for Europe?
It is a moment of reckoning. It is a moment of truth. European peoples are discovering that a new America might be born, a new America who does not care about Europe, a new America who does not really care about democracy abroad. This might be the new situation of the world. So it's a huge wake-up call for Europe to defend ourselves, to defend our creed, our values, and to take the flame back in the hands of the European people of freedom and humanistic values. Yes, it is a real wake-up call. We were like sleepwalkers since decades, believing in the eternal American umbrella. We discover that America can be led by a man like Donald Trump, who hates Zelenskyy, who is able to humiliate a great hero in his office and who probably does not like Europe, and who is a good mate, a good friend of Vladimir Putin. He might make the peace. I hope for that. I long for that with all my heart. But one thing is sure, which is sure, is that there is this link between Trump and Putin, this bromance between the two, this ideological affinity. And this for Europe is a real problem, because this man, whom we are seeing now on the screen, is a terrorist, is a war criminal. He committed so huge crimes in the last 3 years. Believe me, I was on the ground so many times in Ukraine. This man is hugely guilty. So hope American administration is discovering that too.
Bernard, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you, Yalda.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, why now? The Philippines sent former president to the International Criminal Court.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
The former Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte is tonight on his way to The Hague to answer allegations over the brutal drugs war that defined his time in office. An international criminal court warrant describes Duterte as the head of a death squad, but he denies any wrongdoing and his daughter says her father has been kidnapped. Our Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynch explains why he was arrested now.
The former leader of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, has been arrested after the International Criminal Court issued a warrant accusing him of crimes against humanity. Why? It's all connected to his war on drugs when he was mayor and then president between 2011 and 2019. Human rights groups estimate tens of thousands of people were killed, gunned down by police officers, hitmen and vigilantes. Activists claim many of the victims were poor and had nothing to do with the drugs trade, but Duterte has remained unapologetic about his bloody crackdown.
When I say I shoot them dead, I prefer to shoot them in the heart or in the head. That's at the end of the problem.
When Duterte was in power, many of his supporters passionately embraced his strongman approach. But last year, Sky News captured the cost of the killings on those left behind. Some people say Duterte made the Philippines safer.
No, everyone was put in danger. He's an animal. He has no heart, no mind, no soul.
A gunman or gunmen would kill a father while he was even holding his 4-year-old daughter.
Now Duterte's in custody, claiming he's done nothing wrong.
What is the law and what is the crime that I committed?
Now, Duterte's team claim that his arrest is unlawful. He actually withdrew the Philippines from the ICC back in 2019, but the International Criminal Court say that his alleged crimes took place before then. Duterte represents a big test for the ICC. It's been going after other big foreign leaders, including Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu and the head of Myanmar's military junta. Duterte is the latest high-profile target.
Well, this is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, we're minutes away from voting ending in Greenland's election, overshadowed by a Trump takeover threat.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power. No freedom! Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Exclusively on Peacock. 2 teams, 1 city, everything on the line.
Gloves off, let them rip into each other again.
Arsenal.
Oh, that's a brilliant strike!
Victory can keep their title hopes alive.
Arsenal flying!
But Chelsea need all 3 points in their own chase for top 4.
Who else?
This is the Premier League. Streaming on Peacock.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Now, it's not an election that the world would normally take much interest in, but today Greenland has voted in the international spotlight. Donald Trump's continuing pledges to take control of the mineral-rich Arctic island has fired up debate about its future and perhaps full independence. Shortly, we'll go live to our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, but first his report.
It is a place of huge potential, of natural wealth and beauty. But Greenland's only now just started to grab the world's attention. We all know why.
We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. But we need it really for international world security, and I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
So which one's your vote? But the US president's advances have not gone down well here among many. We join tour operators preparing for a tourist season like no other. They admit Donald Trump has been good for business.
It's free advertisement. So we are looking into a very busy season this year.
Donald Trump going out and talking about Greenland like it has never been mentioned before. It's on everybody's lips. Like everybody knows what Greenland is at the moment.
He's put you on the map.
Yeah, definitely, and that's a fact.
But the idea America could take over Greenland under President Trump only makes them angry.
I think that guy's lunatic. He's mad. There's something wrong with his head.
Right up to the eve of Election Day, the US president has been continuing his meddling. Donald Trump's direct interference is making this a highly charged election. When Greenlanders go to the polls, they may end up returning the biggest vote yet in favour of independence from Denmark.
Trump wants to buy my country, Greenland.
Greenland's biggest social media influencer is running for office. Kupanak Olsen says Donald Trump's making it more likely Greenland goes its own way, not Denmark's or America's.
Because everyone in Greenland now have to have an opinion whether we should stay under Denmark or whether we should become a state under the United States or whether we should become independent. It's making us aware, hey, we are more worth than what the Danish people have been telling us the last 300 years. Maybe we can stand on our own feet.
with messages like this from the American president on the eve of the election, offering Greenland investment worth billions of dollars to make you rich, feelings are running high here.
What kind of message do you hope the election sends to Donald Trump?
I hope it sends a clear message to him that we are not for sale. We don't want to be Americans. No, we don't want to be Danes. We want to be Greenlanders, and we want our own independence in the future, and we want to build our own country by ourselves, not with his help.
There's no doubt Donald Trump's energised Greenland's politics. But how much they're shifting in his direction will only become clear when the voting is over.
And we've got Dom with us now, of course. And Dom, you look quite rugged up there. It does look quite cold. But, I mean, we're expecting the polls to close in the next 10 minutes or so. But home to about 57,000 Greenlanders. And never, I imagine, would they have thought that they would be in the eyes of the world like this.
No, I mean, we don't normally cover this election. It's not normally covered. Nuuk, the capital of Greenland, is crawling with foreign journalists like us, and the eyes of the world are on this place like never before. I might look cold and well wrapped up, but actually it was quite a balmy day today by Greenland standards, and we were at the polling station. There is one polling station for this capital city, because there are only around 20,000 people living here, and there are a lot of people out to vote. Donald Trump has, I think it's fair to say, energised politics here, for good or for bad. What he did in Congress a week ago was to effectively say that he wants to prize Greenland away from Denmark. He said that the Greenland people have a right to choose their own destiny, and if they want to join America, he will help them do so. He says he wants to do that for and welcome them for strategic reasons. How is that going to play out? Well, there are a number of different parties, but what differs them, they all want independence from Denmark, but what distinguishes them is there are those who say that Greenland is not ready for independence yet, and it needs to stay with Denmark for some time to come. If they do well, then it may be a sign that the people here are rather worried and fearful of what Trump has done. But if the other parties, some of them who want to have independence much quicker, do well, it may be a sign that the people of Greenland are a bit more daring and might go in a direction that Trump would like them to. Although I think it's fair to say we're not going to see Greenland joining America as its 51st state.
Well, you know, that's not a discussion part of this election, but is it a fear? I mean, you heard there people saying, I mean, you spoke to them, they're saying, we're not for sale. But in the back of their minds, are they concerned, worried that perhaps, you know, they may get annexed if the US president gets his way?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a range of opinion. I think, you know, it's fair to say that Greenland doesn't want to join America for a number of reasons. Most of all, as one of them put us today, she's from a party that does want to see independence fairly quickly. She said, you know, we've had 300 years of colonialism under the Danes. We don't want to trade that in for something similar under the Americans under Donald Trump. But she's saying that his attention show that Greenland is able to confidently stand on its own 2 feet. Against that, you've got those who are saying, no, be careful what you wish for. Greenland is not ready for this. And on its own, if it declares independence, it could be preyed upon by Donald Trump. And I think the fear is that his interventions are polarising and dividing opinion here and meddling in a neighbour.
Well, Tom, we'll have to wait and see how this election pans out. We'll probably know by the morning. Thank you so much. And thank you to you for watching this evening. Goodbye.